Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. My name is Pat Wilver. I'm one of the co-owners of Trophy Point Realty Group. I was a third ID veteran stationed here from 2014 and 19, and I decided to stick around Savannah after I got out of the Army. We're here today to talk a little bit about some things to consider when doing a PCS move. So we're going to start off with selling a home. We're gonna assume that you're selling a home wherever you're coming here from. And we're going to go over some tips and tricks in that regard. If that's not the case, if you're not selling, feel free to go ahead and skip ahead past this section because it's not going to be super relevant to you. When you look at selling, there's a couple things to consider. First of all is the money factor, the monetary factor, and that is, hey, if I sell this house, can I take the equity that I have in that house and take that cash and go put it to use somewhere else that's going to make me more money than if I were to hold on to this house and rent it out? And if all you care about is the money, that's the only question you want to look at. If the answer is yes, I can find a better use for that money elsewhere, then you should sell. You should sell, or you should at least refinance and pull out some of that money. Also, personal preference comes into play. Maybe you don't want to be a landlord. Being a landlord can kind of be a pain. And some people just don't want to do that, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So that's another reason to sell. And then third, you might have to sell. Maybe you can't qualify for a second mortgage. Maybe you can't qualify for a second mortgage, or maybe you're having a divorce or a change in your financial situation where it's just not feasible for you to actually keep on to that house and then buy a second one. So those are the three main considerations. So let's take a look here. Next slide. All right, so factor one that we look at is money. So we already kind of talked about this a little bit. So let's just go ahead and go to the next slide where we'll get a little more detail. So this is an example. Let's say you can sell your home and put 50 grand in your pocket, or you can rent it out and make $5,000 in profit each year. And that's, let's just say that that's your cash profit. That's your cash flow. Your cash flow about $450 a month. That's a really good cash return on your equity. Actually, that's really good. If that was me, I'd probably want to look to hold on. How do I hold on to that rental and buy something else? If I was making that much cash flow, that's pretty solid, especially if you bought that home with a VA loan and you don't have any money down. That's pretty sweet. So let's say you've got that 50 grand of equity and you're not going to cash flow, or maybe you're going to be cash flow negative. That's going to be a situation where, look possibly to selling that property. And there is some other options too, we'll talk about later. You don't necessarily have to sell. If you have a lot of equity in your home, you can look into a cash out refinance perhaps, and you can pull out some of that money, not all of it, but some of it, and your cash flow will probably go down a little bit, but that's a way to hold on to a property. So personal preference, right? So we kind of talk about this. Do you want to rent even if the numbers don't necessarily add up? You can do a HELOC, which basically is a line of credit that's tied to your home that you can take out money. A lot of people use those to renovate homes. People who flip houses like to use HELOCs for those, or a cash out refinance. Just put a new 30-year loan on, pull out some cash. Other personal preference: do you want to be a landlord? There's property management, there's answering tenant questions and issues quickly, there's covering maintenance items. If the air conditioning goes out, boom, there's probably a $7,000 bill that you have to cover. So that's, some people don't want to do that. And then, maybe you have a use for that equity outside of making money as an investment. Maybe you need it to make a down payment on your next house. Maybe you are about to send your kids to college. Maybe you have some credit card debt that you'd like to pay off. That's a good use of that equity. And that might be a reason to sell outside of, looking for a better investment. So necessity, right? Maybe you need to free up your VA entitlement. It is possible to have two VA loans at the same time. I actually myself have done that. There are some things you need to go to. You're going to want to talk to a good lender about your situation and ask the question, can I get a second VA loan? And if so, in my case, when I got my second VA loan, I had to bring some money to the table as a down payment. So you may have to do that, especially if the house you currently own on your VA loan is worth a good amount of money. So maybe you need to free up that VA entitlement. Maybe you need to, maybe you just can't qualify for two homes at the same time. Maybe you're starting out your career in the Army, you're not making a ton of money yet. or maybe you've got a lot of other debt obligations out there, or your credit's not so great. Again, that's a lender question. You have to ask if you can even qualify for a second mortgage. Like we kind of talked about, maybe you need to access home equity in order to make the next purchase. And then, of course, changing your financial situation, divorce, things like that, sometimes will make it necessary to sell a house, even if you don't want to. All right, so let's look a little bit into renting out your home after you move away. So let's say that you decided you want to rent it. What does that look like? Here's the bottom line up front. If you want to self-manage, if you want to not have to pay a property manager, then you need to already have connections with handyman, contractors, and other vendors that you've worked with and you trust. It's very difficult to self-manage from a distance unless you already have these relationships built and they're people that you've worked with before and you trust them. So if you're going to PCS in 3 months and you're trying to self-manage and you haven't built any of those relationships yet, it might be a little bit too late to do that. So that's important. So let's talk about, what are some landlord duties, right? Well, the hardest one is really placing a tenant, is finding that tenant, placing them into the property. This is very, very difficult. I tried to do it once from a distance and it just didn't work out. I ended up hiring a friend of mine who's an agent. This is before I became an agent and I was still in the military. And I just hired them to find me a tenant. It's going to be very, very difficult to do from a distance. Not necessarily impossible, but you're going to have to pay somebody to do something. If you pay an agent to do it and they're doing this as a one-off, I'd probably expect to pay 1 month of rent and commission for them to do that work. Maybe if they do you a solid, they do it for cheaper. But me personally, I don't really even like to place tenants. It's a lot more work than it's worth to me, unless it's a rental property that's really close to where I live, and it's not a burden for me to drive over and show it. So we're also, figuring out tenant issues and questions. Tenant calls you, hey, the sink's clogged, I locked myself out, or hey, I think there's something wrong with the stove. These are things that come up. And what makes it difficult, this is the important contingency plan, right? What if you're at NTC? What if you're deployed? What if they can't get a hold of you? Who A, is going to answer the phone when you can't? And B, who can make a decision? Say, if you're out in the box at NTC and say you just went out and you got 10 days and the air conditioning goes out and it's summertime, you need to have somebody who can make that decision for you while you're not around, because your tenants are not going to want to wait 10 days for you to get back from the box to approve a $6,000 repair, right? So that's important. That's very important. That's something, if you don't have a good answer to that, you should just have a property manager to handle that for you. Property management, typically a low margin business. So it's a natural incentive for property managers to cut costs. There's some good ones. There's a lot of bad ones. Most real estate people who do property management, they typically do it as a way to keep their past clients kind of in-house and top of mind, because eventually down the road, you're going to want to sell, and you want to be the first person they think of. So a lot of the incentive to do property management is not so much to make money on the management. It is just to kind of keep your past clients kind of in the circle, right? So get recommendations. Investor Facebook groups are a good place to go. Find your local area and search on Facebook for real estate investors. Ask some people there. If not, Google, call around. I find referrals typically to be the best. And then cost, in this market, is typically 10% plus tenant placement fees. In the Savannah market, it's typically a half a month rent is tenant placement. Other markets are as high as a full month rent tenant placement. And you also need to vet these people, right? So interview a couple. Don't just go with the first person you talk to. Go meet with them, check out their office. Does it look organized? Do they speak well? Do they write well? Ask them, what kind of software did they use? Are they using a professional software like AppFolio, or are they, old school, or no software at all? How many properties do they have under management versus how many people on staff, right? If they have 300 properties under management and only one person on staff, that person is going to be overwhelmed and they probably won't be doing a good job. And then it's also good, I think, to call as a tenant. Look at the property they're advertising, pretend to be a tenant. Hey, I'd like to see this property. How responsive are they, right? Do they get back to you, or do they kind of just, let things slide? Because I see properties sometimes, listed for rent, that are at a good price that should have rented and they don't. And a lot of the times it's because the property managers are just not following up with those leads. So you don't want that to be your house. All right, so let's say you decided to sell. Let's say selling's the best decision for you, and instead of go that route. So, hey, inventory is super low, right? There's a pretty strong seller's market, even with rates going up as they are. We still find it's a pretty strong seller's market. So you think the house will sell itself, right? And that's not always the case. There are a few things that you can do to get every dollar of equity possible out of the sale of your home. Wow, and this is bold and underlined, making the process smooth and easy, because you got a PCS move. There's a lot of steps, a lot of moving pieces that go into selling a home, and it's a lot of work when you're also trying to clear post and figure out the kids' schooling situation and find a new house where you're moving, etc. So the first steps, right? So we have here, number one, call a trusted agent as soon as you can. Of course, I'm an agent. I'm incentivized to get you to use an agent, but there are really two big reasons why I recommend that. And one is I myself will use an agent in a market that I do not understand, other markets that I invest in. I use an agent, even though I've done 100+ transactions here in the Savannah, Fort Stewart market. I just do that because there's so many different things, and it's not just figuring out what the market value of a home should be, but there's different customs and different things that people do in different markets that if you don't know how those things work, it's you're going to be missing out on some things, making it difficult on yourself and possibly leaving money on the table as well. If you don't know an agent, like I said, I always say ask your friends for recommendations first, right? That being said, your friends might have worked with a dud and not even known it, so you still want to vet these people, but ask, and always talk to a couple different agents. You want to interview them. You want to make sure that they return your calls, right? If you're talking to somebody who say that takes them a day to get back to you, right? Typically either they're too busy, to take you on, or they're just lazy, one or the other. And I've been there before where I've, sometimes forgotten to text people back. And that's when I decided to start bringing on new agents onto my team, because I knew that I was getting busy to the point where I myself could not provide the level of service that I need to. So I hired more people, and now we do that. And take a peek at some of their listings, right? You always want to ask them, hey, can I see some of your old listings? Or if you go on Zillow and you search that agent, you'll see their old listings. The ones where they represented the seller. Look at some of the photos. Did they look professionally done, or were they cell phone pictures? How did they sell? Did they go under contract quickly? Things like that. The good thing about when you're trying to vet a real estate agent is it's very easy to look at their past work, because it's on Zillow, it's on realtor.com for you to see, how they are, and how much deal flow they have. Are they doing 20, 30 deals a year, or are they doing 2 or 3? You probably don't want to work with the guy that's doing 2 or 3, or the person that just started, unless that person is working with a team like mine, where they have people that they can reach to for guidance and wisdom and things like that. Our younger agents, we always take them under our wing, and their first few months in the business, until they've established and they got rocking and rolling, we help them every step of the way. So not necessarily bad to work with that rookie, as long as that rookie's got a mentor that's helping them out, right? Sometimes I find rookies are the best because they have the most time and they're putting in the most work, and they're so scared about doing a bad job that they can be very, very, really very good, as long as they've got some guidance. So what's next, right? Call your agent and look at some, what are some home improvement projects that we can do, right? What's some stuff that we can do to add some value? There might be some very easy things that you could do to add a lot of value to your home, depending on what you're looking at. So here's some examples. You can mulch the flower beds, replace your beat up doorknobs, fixing dents in the drywall, touching up paint, easy things. This is something, if you're a little bit handy, you can take, the 2 months before you go to move, and you can just work on that, Saturday afternoons and get that done. And I think it's good. That's why you want to call an agent sooner rather than later, because you can get an agent in your house 6 months before you're going to move. They can go over some of that stuff, and that way you're not stressed out trying to get all these projects done right in the last month before you PCS. And then there's some bigger projects too, that you might want to hire out to a contractor. Maybe your flooring is really beat up and it's time for some new flooring. Maybe your kitchen cabinets are just trash, and maybe you want to, do a little bit of a bigger project. That might be worth it, that might not. That's why you want to enlist an agent's help. So your agent should be able to ballpark you what it's going to cost, estimate how much value it'll add to the home, and then provide recommendations for good contractors who will do the job right and at a fair price. So there's some things not to do, right? If you're in a cheap old starter home and all the homes around you are cheap starter homes, it's not going to get you a bunch of money to put in stone countertops. Okay, it's just probably not going to be worth it. Go for butcher block. It's going to be a lot cheaper. It looks nice, like for real. Also, the real hardwood flooring, it almost never makes sense to put real hardwood flooring. I met a couple sellers who wanted me to sell their house, and they were just bragging, "Oh, I put this real hardwood in. It costs so much money. It's going to add so much value." And they never want to hear it when I tell them it's not going to add value, because every other house in this neighborhood has the laminate floors, the vinyl plank floors. Buyers here are totally satisfied with that. They're not going to pay you $15,000 more for their hardwood that they don't really care about anyway, right? So yeah, take a look at recent solds in your neighborhood. What do they look like? And of course, again, talk to your agent. They should know. And anytime you're thinking of any home improvement project, maybe you just moved into your house and you're thinking, hey, what if I do this? Call your agent, ask them, hey, is this going to add value? And just because it won't add value doesn't necessarily mean you don't do it if you want to do it for you and because you would enjoy it. But that way you at least know, how much money are you going to invest in this project versus how much will you get out when you sell it. So getting to the market, right? Talk to a lender and figure out how much your debt to income ratio can support a second mortgage. If you can get approved for a second mortgage, I recommend buying your new home and moving into it before you sell the old one. And that way, vacant houses typically are able to sell for more. One, because it's going to be a lot easier for agents to schedule appointments. They can just show up versus having to schedule. Makes it easier on you as well. Also, you can really do a deep clean. You can really make sure everything's perfect. And, especially I know when I was in the military, and even now to an extent, because I'm kind of cheap, I just had all this beat up furniture because I was PCSing all the time, and it all looked terrible. And sometimes I haven't, sold a house PCSing. I've kept on everything I bought as a rental. But if you were like me and have beat up ratty furniture, it's better if that stuff's out of the house, right? Staging is sometimes good, even in this hot market. I recently did a renovation project, a flip. It was a beautiful, gorgeous flip. And I spent, about $2,000 staging, and I think it was worth every penny. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes not. Depends on your situation. And you don't necessarily have to stage all the rooms. Sometimes just a few little decorative pieces can go a long way. Your agent should know who a good stager is. So let's take a look. This is the timeline. This is a rough timeline. So let's say, June 1st is your move out day, right? These are your kind of big touch points here, right? So you want to do the cleaning after you move out. You want to do the staging after that, if that's something you're going to do. The day after that, professional photos. Photos take a day or two to get back. Boom, listings live on the 7th, right? If it's priced well in this market, if it's priced well, you're typically under contract. Say you list on a Friday morning, typically by Sunday night, Monday morning, you figured out who's going to buy your house, right? A couple of days later, buyer's going to do their inspection. A couple of days after that, they're out of due diligence. And that means basically they're buying the house unless it appraises low or they somehow don't get approved for the loan. It takes another week after that. And then we can typically expect to close typically in 30 days. So June 10th, July 10th, typically 30 days that's most contracts that we're seeing, right? So we're looking at about a 45 day period between the time you move out and the time that house is being sold, more or less. Now, what this doesn't account for is sometimes an inspection happens and the buyer backs out. Well, that's going to add, 5 to 7 days on your timeline. Or it doesn't appraise and the buyer backs out. That's going to add about 20 days onto this timeline. Those are things that happen. It's anytime you go under contract on that house, just keep in mind that it's not it's not happening until the money hits your bank account, right? So always, you know, don't start making big plans until you're getting closer to that closing time. All right, so getting to the market. So hey, most people won't be able to move out before listing. That's okay. We just modify that timeline. You get the cleaning done while you're still living there, and we just work around the schedule. That's not so big a deal. The big thing is try to take down some of your trinkets, some of your different photos and stuff, because you want to have the house be as neutral as possible to appeal to the widest amount of people, and so that they can imagine themselves living in the house, right? If it's all, all your personal effects and all your trinkets, well, they're going to come in and that's still going to be your house, not theirs. You want them to walk through the home and imagine their own personal effects on the wall. Also, try to keep the moving boxes, put them in the garage, put them in a spare bedroom. It's much better if all of your random junk is in one spare bedroom and, a buyer can open the door and say, oh yeah, this is where they're staging all their stuff, versus having moving boxes all over the house. So yeah. All right, so here we go. There's a couple of things that we can look to do to make the transition easier. Right now in this market, sellers are pretty successful in getting a seller rent back period. And what's good about that is you can basically sell your house. Say you sell your house on June 30th and you still live in it until July 30th, right? That allows you to do two things. One, it makes your move less stressful. And two, the biggest thing is it makes purchasing your new home and your new duty station a lot easier, because it is very difficult right now. If you make an offer, say you're going to Fort Carson, and you make an offer, and in that offer it says, hey, this is my offer and it's contingent on my house in Fort Stewart selling. That offer is probably not going to go anywhere. It's probably not going to get accepted. So if the house is already sold, you don't have to make that contingency, right? So that's a good thing about that, especially if you can't qualify for that second mortgage without selling the first home. That's a great thing to look at. And that's why you want, we see this next bullet point, lots of moving pieces, right? The agent helping you sell your home, and the agent that's going to help you buy your new home, and the lender that's going to give you the money to buy your new home should all be kind of touching base about your situation, because the agent that's going to help you buy a new home and the lender are going to have information that the agent who's helping you sell your home needs to know. So make sure that you trust both these people. If you don't know someone in the duty station you're going to, ask your agent. If you ask me, hey, do you know a good agent in Carson? Yes, I do. Lewis, yes, I do. Bliss, Hood, Bragg. So especially if your agent does a lot of military PCS moves, I'm sure they know somebody where you're going, somebody who's good. So what's the relationship look like? You can be as involved as you want to. Most of the time, our clients don't want to be involved because they have a bunch of stuff going on. They don't have time to worry about it. That's why they hired us. You should hear from your agent at least once a week. Typically, at least once a day, your first weekend on the market. Just kind of keeping you updated. Hey, we got these offers, this, that. Let's pick a time to talk about all of them. And then you sit down and you go over all the offers and the pros and cons of each one. You pick one, you go under contract. Once you go under contract, it shouldn't be an everyday kind of thing. Just as things come up, you should hear from your agent. It's best to let your agent do the job that they're good at, but always trust but verify, and don't be afraid to ask why. It's something sometimes I forget to explain why up front. I just assume that people know things that they shouldn't know or they wouldn't know. And so, I like when my clients ask me, hey, why are we doing this? Oh, well, this is why we're doing it, because of, this thing. Never talk to buyers. Don't talk to buyers. Do not talk to buyers. Do not talk to buyers. I have never seen a seller talk to a buyer and do anything but give the buyer information that the buyer can use as leverage. It's best not to talk to them. Really, whenever buyers are looking at the house, you should not be in the house. A couple of reasons. One, they're going to feel rushed. They might feel like you're looking over their shoulders. They're not going to say the things to their agent that they want to. But two, the biggest thing is you never do anything good by talking to those buyers, or especially their agent. I love when I'm working with a buyer, I love when the seller's in the house, and I just love to talk to them. And I put on my friendly face, and I'm friendly, but I'm always trying to get, what kind of information can I get that's going to help me negotiate a deal? You don't want to be there. All right, so hey, let's move on to buying, right? How do we buy? So when do you make your money in real estate? It's not when you sell, it is when you buy, right? You make your money when you buy. What that means is if you pay too much now, it doesn't matter what happens in the market, you're going to be in a tough spot later. Why I like owning real estate is the homes tend to appreciate over time. And every month you're paying off your mortgage balance instead of paying off your landlord's mortgage. And the other good thing is too, you buy a home, you're on a 30-year fixed mortgage, your payment's not going to change. Whereas rents have traditionally always increased. So how do we do it remotely? We look at some quick things. Let's say you're going to be somewhere for only a year. Maybe you're going to Fort Benning for the captain's career course or something. Probably don't buy there, right? I didn't buy when I went to the career course. It's probably best to rent unless you just find the smoking good deal, which are kind of hard to find in this market, right? Do you believe housing prices will be worth more when you leave? So say you're PCSing to a duty station that just got word that they're going to lose a whole brigade. That might make a big impact, right? A negative impact on the housing prices. So, do a little research in the local economy. Like Savannah's growing. Fort Stewart's growing. It's the only port. It's the only armored assets on the East Coast, the only armored assets within 50 miles of a deep water port. I don't think Fort Stewart's going anywhere, right? They just spent a bunch of money modernizing the brigades, so anyway, I'm bullish on Savannah on the Fort Stewart market. And then will you be able to cash flow the house as a rental when you PCS? It's always something to look at. If you expect that you're going to be somewhere for 5 years, that's not so much of a consideration, because in 5 years, there might be some fluctuations in housing prices, but typically in 5 years, you're going to see appreciation, not only in housing prices, but in rental amounts. So that should be a little safer, but I think it's always good. Like, hey, can I at least break even? If I have to rent this place, can I at least break even on it? If something crazy happens to the economy and I have to rent this thing for a year or two after I PCS, can I and at least kind of break even? It's something important to look at. So here's an example. If you're going to Stewart and you're buying a house in the mid 200,000 price point in Richmond Hill, those places usually rent for $1,700 to $1,850 a month, give or take. And here's some of your numbers here. So with your mortgage, property management costs, maintenance, vacancy reserve, you're looking at, roughly $200 to $300 every month in cash flow. So that's good. All right, awesome. And in addition to cash flow, you've also got increases in your equity that come from paying off your mortgage every month and from appreciation. So I'd say that's a good deal. And don't forget, these property taxes and insurance are not the same everywhere. It's different in Richmond Hill than it is in Savannah, and which is different than it is in Texas and North Carolina. So if you're going to some different market, these numbers might be a little different for you. And also this mortgage payment. I mean, rates are going up, right? I did just edit this, 2 months ago when I did this slide, it was $1,100 a month. Now it's closer to 12. It could be more or less, whatever. So key players, right, is your real estate. I think I've kind of hit on this a lot. They should put your interests first. They should be candid. They should have a decent background with recent transactions, and communicative is the biggest thing. If they're responsive and they get back to you quickly and they work hard and they have some work ethic, that is probably the most important thing that you're looking at. Home inspector, right? I have my home inspectors that I like and I use over and over and over again for my own transactions and for my clients. I found that every time a client wants to use their own home inspector, it doesn't go well. I had a client use one that he wanted to use, and the inspector ended up missing about $20,000 worth of foundation issues that should have been found. So lender, I have lenders I like to work with. And again, I find when clients bring their own lenders, I'm typically not too satisfied, although sometimes I am. I have found some good lenders from clients of mine, but I'd say 4 times out of 5, they bring me a terrible lender. And as always, trust but verify, right? Look at reviews, Google, Facebook, Zillow, things like that. So get acquainted with the area, right? If you can, fly out. even if it's a couple months before and you're not even ready to buy it, just fly out, tour some neighborhoods, meet up with your agent, drive around for an afternoon with them, and get to know what you're looking at. That's important. All right. You can't always do that though. So Google Street View goes a long way. If you're looking at a house and you can't go see it, pull it up on Street View, drive around the neighborhood in Street View, and check the date stamp on that imagery. If it's from 2008, it's probably not good imagery anymore, right? And then check the overhead map, right? Are you close to an airport, interstate, railroad? Check the commute. You can go on Google and you can put the commute from that address to where you're going to be on post, and you can actually set your arrival time to say, hey, I want to arrive at 6:30 or really probably 6:15 at least, and see what you can see what gate traffic is going to look like. And as always, your agent should be able to provide insight as well. So common pitfalls, right? Generally, your homes built after 85 are going to be up to current building standards, except some of those between like 85 and 90, you're going to have polybutylene plumbing, which isn't that big of a deal really, but they don't use it anymore because it has had some issues. If you're buying something that was built in 2005, there's probably nothing majorly wrong with it, right? Big ticket items, HVAC, water heaters, they typically have a 10 to 15 year service life. 5 to 10 grand for an HVAC, depending on how large your house is, and typically $1,000-$1,500 to get a water heater replaced. And people always freak out about water heaters. Like, it's really not a super expensive item. And then your roof, 25 to 40 years, depending on the type of shingle, 5 to 10K to replace those roofs. Typically, different markets are different. I was talking to somebody who's doing stuff in Virginia, and he says he typically has to pay a lot more than that. This is for my market in Savannah, and kind of what I typically pay for a roof. So it's always the old houses you got to watch out for. But the newer houses are typically pretty easy, especially for me as an experienced agent who does a lot of renovation projects. I can typically know pretty well whether the inspector is going to find major issues. Visual tours, right? So you're remote. What I like to do is, I got a little stabilizing gyro and I run it on wide angle lens at 60 frames per second. And I send the videos. I don't FaceTime because FaceTime gets grainy. I'll send videos. Keep them kind of short so they send easily on iMessage and WhatsApp. And I give narrations. I can kind of anticipate the questions that somebody would ask on FaceTime. And I'll say, hey, these counters are made out of this and this flooring is made out of that. And, the flow in the shower is good, etc. Some people, especially if you're a really, really kind of picky person, maybe you want to get some short-term rental set up for the first couple months that you're, do your PCS, get a short-term rental, and, actually go that route. There's not anything wrong with that. And of course, if possible, it's not very efficient for you to fly out when you're viewing homes, right? Especially in this market, you're going to probably lose some bids before you lock one up. So lock it up. And then during your due diligence period, when that home inspection is going on, if you want to see it, then fly out or drive out and take a look. It's definitely what I would recommend. So here's how we kind of lock them down, right? It's like I said, this is a seller's market. So what do we do to win offers? Well, number one is price. I mean, cash is king. How much money you're coming in with, that's the most important. Tied into that is kind of the escalation clauses. So we can say, hey, we'll pay you $225, but if you have a higher offer, we'll go up to $235 to beat it, something like that. No seller closing costs, right? It's hard to get the sellers to pay your closing costs. I don't ever recommend that people ask for closing costs in this market. Typically, your average home that people buy here in the Fort Stewart market, you're looking at $6,000 in closing costs for like a low $200,000 home. And if you go up to $500,000, you're probably looking at closer to like 12 grand, 13 grand in closing costs, just to give you an idea of what that's going to cost. An appraisal gap, that's the way to win. You say, hey, if it appraises low, we'll pay the difference up to 10 grand in cash. Boom. Large earnest money deposits. Your earnest money is a deposit that you make within a couple of days of going under contract that gets sent typically to the closing attorney to hold on to. And that's kind of your good faith thing. It means, hey, first of all, I'm in a financially secure enough position to make this deposit. And two, if I don't fulfill the terms of the agreement that we agreed to, that you get to keep that money. So if it's the day before closing and I back out of the deal, you keep that money, right? It's a little bit of security. Option money that's an optional thing. And that basically says, hey, I have this due diligence period where my earnest money is refundable, but you get to keep, $200-300 regardless. If I back out during due diligence because I find some problems, you still keep that money. It helps. Keep your due diligence periods tight. You're not going to get a 2-week due diligence. Okay. A couple of years ago, you used to be able to get a 2-week due diligence. Nowadays, I don't recommend any more than 10 days, and really 5 days. It should be enough time to get an inspection done on most houses. This is an important point. You don't need to pull all the available levers, right? I won one. Oh, and here's the most important: seller's needs and wants, right? So I find out from a seller one time that he needs to sell his house before he can buy a new one. So we offered him a 45-day rent back, and that's what won us that bid. There were higher bids, but we offered the rent back and we won it. So it's always important for your agent to ask that seller's agent, what do you need? What do you want? What are things that we can do to win this bid that are important to your seller? So that's an important piece as well. Awesome. So that pretty much ties it up, guys. This isn't a live thing, so there's not going to be question and answer from the audience. This is a recording. I encourage you, if you have any questions, leave us a comment, send us an email or a text. We'll put some contact information up. We would love to talk to you. This is a very general, I'll try to make this somewhat fast. There's a lot of information in your specific situation that we probably didn't cover. So hopefully now you at least know what questions you should be asking. Please reach out to us, ask us the questions, ask how we can help. Even if you're not doing business in Savannah or Fort Stewart and you're trying to go somewhere else, if you happen to see this video and maybe you're moving from Carson to Bliss, give us a shout. We're happy to recommend some friends of ours out in those markets and help you out. Thanks, guys.